You are Locked On Falcons Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Falcons Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Aaron Freeman. Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu, Locked On to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. The Locked On Falcons Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Falcons are looking for their fourth win in a row today, but other than the run game, they couldn't get anything going to get there. So let's get right into what went wrong in a lopsided 34-14 loss to the Seattle Seahawks. So the Falcons offense relied on the defense and even special teams to keep them in games earlier in the season. Then the offense returned the favor the last three games, but we really didn't see that complementary brand of football today. So let's start with where the defense kind of let this team down. Jarvis, what happened?
This defense was awful today. When you think about what they needed to do coming into games, we talk about the matchup, right? Because games, style make the fight. And one of the things that, Aaron and I talked about on his show on Locked On Falcons is the fact that the Seattle offensive line was not good. They had a fourth string right tackle in there today, and a guy that they drafted in the 6th or 7th round, and he was in there, getting reps at the starting right tackle spot, and the Falcons weren't able to take advantage of it. And to be honest with you, let me take that back. I take that back. Damone Harris, the guy who's elevated from the practice squad, he was able to take advantage. But the guy that they traded for in Matthew Judon was not able to do that on a consistent basis. James Smith-Williams, a guy who I talked about how he's a guy who's going to be good for you in that run game. I love the way he plays against the run. He was able even to get home today. When you think about it from that aspect, I'm sorry, Judon has not done what he's supposed to do. And not only in the passing game, but in the run game too. Oh my gosh, so soft on the edges. It was Kenneth Walker had like several cutbacks. And you saw him take advantage of that, early on in the game. And you just looking at, and we even talked about this. I was just saying, like, this game is kind of weird. It just feels off. It just feels like it's just going through the motions. And I felt like I was going through the motions for a little while. I was like, man, I can't take on the same thing that the Falcons did. But yeah, I think overall this defense just did not come to play today. Unadvocated. Oh yeah, coming off the ball, get a great get off. And Geno Smith just looked at you like, oh, okay, I'm just step up. You ain't gonna do it. Make the throw. And it was just awful. And then right before halftime, 4 seconds to go, Justin Simmons, sir, what are you doing? Like, why are you outside of AJ Terrell? There's no defense that should be true. You should end up outside of AJ Terrell. AJ Terrell opened up. To give him credit. I know people want to kind of throw him under the bus, and I kind of get that. I understand that. But he was expecting Justin Simmons to be right there. More than likely, that was quarters coverage, right? Mm-hmm. So that safety has to hold that spot. He's supposed to be in that spot. They throw a post, he's supposed to be there, period. There's no other explanation for it but the fact that the Falcons defense did not come to play today. They walked through this entire game, and it was weird the entire game. And that's exactly how it ended.
Yeah, and then there's no explanation as well for when you're playing a game where you feel like we feel like they're kind of sleepwalking through it. We don't quite know what's going on. There's no at least cohesion or consistency. Then you also can't be responsible for continuing to give the team that is playing with some consistency opportunity after opportunity on third down with senseless penalties. So I think that was a source of frustration as well, because you're too far into the season, Aaron, to be making those kind of elementary mistakes.
Yeah, you're right. And Jarvis nailed it. Like we talked all year long about the bend but don't break Falcons defense, right? And the whole thing that the Falcons, they're not really good at doing anything. The one thing that this defense has been good consistently this year is not giving up explosive plays.
Yep. Yes.
They gave up 4 of those in the first half. And that's basic. Like, I think they've given up maybe like 11 or 12 the entire season.
Lowest in the league.
Yeah. So it's like, that kind of tells you right there, like they came out flat, and Jarvis nailed it with the sort of just Justin Simmons, like that shouldn't be an explosive play that happened. You could talk about the other one, the DK Metcalf on the Jackson and Smith and Jigba. That was just AJ Terrell losing track of the ball in the air. And yeah, you're right. You can criticize AJ Terrell, but not all of that was on him in this game with some of the plays that DK Metcalf was able to go. But T, you're right. Right. You had in the second half, you had a chance for the Falcons to climb out of the hole. You come into the second half, you get a score on that opening drive in the third quarter. You just kind of need your defense to go out there, get a stop. And it seems like you get one. And then you get the penalty on Damon Harris for the roughing the passer. And Seattle proceeds, a couple plays later. And Kenneth Walker beats Caden Ellis on a wheel route for a 17-yard touchdown. And so you basically had the uncharacteristic explosive plays on this bend but don't break defense, and then when you had opportunities to sort of work yourself back into this game, you kept shooting yourself in the foot, and that's been another issue that we've talked about a number of times this season. So it was just an overall flat day for the Falcons. They didn't have it, and normally these last couple of weeks and in a lot of the games they won, they can start off slow and then they'll figure it out in the second half. And this week they just couldn't figure it out in the second half.
And that's what I was thinking of as well, Jarvis. Oftentimes we've said, okay, this defense may come out a little bit leaky here and there. They may kind of get up slowly but surely, right? And so at the half, it's 17. They only allow 17 points. And I say only because at that point, it's still 17-7. And that's still a game for all intents and purposes. And we've been accustomed to seeing Jimmy Lake kind of reset, make some adjustments at the half. We've seen players who maybe started off shaky kind of get back in stride, and at least somewhere in, I'd say midway through the third quarter, definitely the fourth quarter, this defense usually comes up and it makes one or two big plays. And I was even thinking at one point, like, yep, turnover time. This is when we're going to see it, just like they've been doing this entire season, and it's going to happen. But today I didn't see what I felt like were the adjustments, and certainly I didn't see that momentum shift kind of in the middle of the third quarter or maybe the fourth quarter that we've seen from this defense that allows them to be able to shut the door on the opponent. But why didn't we see that today?
It's really weird. It's kind of hard to kind of put my finger on it because like there were some uncharacteristic things. Like I know, saying that this team stunk it up today, that's what it is, but it's kind of hard to put a finger on that. I don't know if you're on the 3-game winning streak, and when you think about the dynamics of this defense and what we've been expecting them to do in this 30+ point score in the past couple of games, and you really depending on this offense to get you a lead so you can play from behind like that. You force the offense to play from behind, and then you can rush the passer and put them in the situation, because there were times where you thought you saw third and they had got the offense in third and long. Geno Smith had to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, but they allowed him to get outside. Like, it's just, and I even dropped a video earlier this week about how they need to rush as a unit. That came to fruition 10 times over today. Like, there were so many points in this game where Geno Smith was dead to rights, and they just allowed him to a guy trying to jump inside. Arne Ebiketie did it again, trying to jump inside, and then he allowed, and once the pressure started to come from that particular side, he jumped down in, and then Geno gets out of the pocket and makes a throw down the field. And there was one time he did that, and the wide receiver wasn't even expecting him. He probably was expecting him to get sacked as well. Bobo, he dropped the ball. I'm just like, man, it's just easy to pick up on guys just not being locked in. Excuse the pun. That's the case, because we have simple, fundamental, day one football type stuff going on, like the Justin Simmons being outside of AJ Terrell in the end zone. That should never happen. I don't care what doggone coverage you in. Then you have guys allowing the quarterback to break containment. Like, what? Like, this is day
over
one.
And over again.
This is over and over again, consistently. So that's the big thing for me. Is just like, that's how you know that these guys, they just didn't have it today, and it just came up. It showed up time and time again, and it's truly unfortunate because they had a chance to do something, win 4 games in a row and really solidify yourself as as a legitimate contender or a team to be reckoned with in the NFC that no one is really looking to take over at this point. You know, the Lions is makes a case for the Lions for sure when they beat Minnesota today. So that they're the number one team right now in my eyes. But it's just like you can't be taken seriously if you're going to have games like these.
Yeah, and I also think it's hard for you to take a team seriously when there is a game like this after you did what you do. And I know sometimes when it's a divisional matchup, even if it's the Carolina Panthers, you get up for that because you know the implications or the ramifications of winning those games or not winning those games. But I did feel like there was a bit of a letdown, almost like the Falcons just walked into the building thinking they were just going to walk over the Seattle Seahawks and just said, hey, we're going to get this fourth win in a row. Or maybe there was an emotional letdown. But yes, something intangible, I would say. We may not be able to put a finger on it per se, because it was everywhere. I mean, it was everything from, the passing game and allowing Geno Smith to do things and then allowing the run game to kind of get off. Like, I didn't expect, not that, Kenneth Walker had the greatest of games, but I guess I just didn't expect it to be a complete game from the other side of the field, courtesy of the Falcons defense.
Yeah. I look at this game, like over the course of a 17-game season, you're going to have games like this where the team comes out flat. And I think what makes it with the Falcons is coming off the 3 wins where they found ways to win. They were able to finish games strong. It's a little disappointing, and especially going up against a Seahawks team that had kind of had the opposite issue that you had, where they started the season strong 3-0, lost 3 straight, struggles on defense, all those various things that they've been going through the last couple of weeks, and the Falcons seemingly kind of putting it together. So you had one team going up, one team going down, and you're kind of expecting, okay, that trend is going to continue, and it just kind of just flipped on the Falcons. And so I think that's what makes it so much more disappointing, that it's like, in isolation over the course of a 17-game season, do I think this loss is going to be like a huge sort of season defining thing? Probably not. But it is one of those things where in this moment, given the trajectory of the team, the momentum of the team, it feels more disappointing because it was like, man, I didn't expect the team. Like, I could understand if the Falcons lost to the Seahawks in another sort of close game and just they didn't get the breaks at the end of the game like they have consistently gotten this year, like we saw in the Steelers game, like we saw in the Chiefs game. But to sort of just come out so flat, I think was really what makes it so disappointing.
Yeah, because this wasn't even one of those games, to your point, Free, where it was like you're close to finding a way, even though you were down or even though it got close and tight at the end of the game. No, this was one of those games where you ceremoniously got sent out of your building, walked out of your building pretty much from kickoff, and it was never in your favor. Now, granted, there were some things that we saw that were positive on offense, but for the most part, this definitely was a game where also this offense for the Falcons decided not to show up. We'll discuss that in the deep dive. This episode of our Locked On Falcons postcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. So Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about these fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Well, therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try so that you can face your fears in a healthy way. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Because think about it, you got about 2.5 months left in this year to get things right and get yourself in a good place to begin 2025. And there's no better way to do that than with BetterHelp. This episode of our Locked On Falcons postcast is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. It's time to put our most precious commodity in a good place, which is time. So don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. You probably studied those things, but maybe not. And even if you didn't or did, maybe it's time for a refresher. That's where Hillsdale College comes in. Those are just a few of the courses that are available, but also the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic and a brand new documentary style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. And of Hillsdale's courses. They're all self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. So go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, guys, we have actually gotten a little bit spoiled over the last 3 weeks because we finally saw this Falcons offense get to where we thought it could be and where we thought it should be, right? Well, today wasn't that day. The numbers don't look as bad as you would think they do as far as like the end of the game goes, Aaron, because Kirk Cousins did finish with 35 attempts, 24 throws for 232 yards and a touchdown. But he did get picked off twice, got sacked 3 times, and really just never saw that passing game come together for the Falcons today. But for you, what was, and we'll start on the passing side, then we'll kind of go to the other side of the ball, but what for you kind of went wrong or was disjointed or disconnected with this passing game today?
Yeah, we saw last week Kirk kind of start the game slow against Carolina and then kind of get things going in the second quarter. So when he kind of started this game slow, it was like, okay, well, wait till the second quarter. Kirk will get it together. And he just never really got it together. He was high on some throws, over the middle that led to some incompletions. And then later in the game, a couple of interceptions. And just the passing game, and then you saw some of the limitations from Kirk Cousins in terms of the mobility that, outside of like that week 1 game hasn't really held back this offense in a major way. But you wondered, okay, Mike Macdonald, I know Seattle's defense hasn't been playing great these last couple of weeks, but there's a reason why everybody thought Mike Macdonald's defense was the greatest thing since, the invention of sliced bread last year. And it's like, he's good enough to probably figure out some ways to get after the quarterback, and they were successfully able to do that. You had some injuries up front on the offensive line as well. Matthew Bergeron going down about halfway through the game with a neck injury, and Ryan Nuzzo missing a series as he got checked out as well. So that didn't help either.
Right.
And then the receivers weren't, like Drake London had some moments, Darnell Mooney had some moments, Kyle Pitts had some moments, but none of the receivers were really sort of taking over the game like we've seen in past weeks when this passing game where it's just like, okay, Kirk can just kind of get back there and feed the hot hand. And again, you had a series or two where one of those guys sort of stepped up, but it wasn't sort of the consistency that we've seen the last couple of weeks. And so I think it was just, outside of basically Bijan, like everybody out here was just struggling today on offense. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about. Just everybody just was asleep, flat, and just didn't have it this Sunday.
And then you have those moments where you feel like it's a step back when you have, and of course we know some of those penalties were on the defensive side of the ball as well. But we also saw some senseless penalties on offense that were stalling these drives that already didn't kind of have an energy or a flow to them. And then you're making some of those basic mistakes that you don't really look to see in week 7 of the NFL season, Jarvis.
Yeah, and you're talking about false starts. You're at home. There were plenty of times in the game I was like, did we just transport to Seattle and the 12th man is getting to the Falcons offensive line? I just don't understand that. I don't understand it. The snap count. Why are you jumping off sides? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And when you talk about the wide receivers and what they were doing, there were some times where those guys were kind of lulling into their routes. Specifically number 8. There was some, and when you lull into your routes, especially if you're going outside those numbers, that's when cornerbacks, they're going to break on the ball. And you saw there was some, I know, Kirk, had a couple of interceptions, but it was potential for a lot more than that.
And it felt like it was more than 2, to be honest.
Absolutely. When you think about it from that standpoint. So, but this is one of those games where, and I think, Aaron, you make a great point when you talk about the limitations on Kirk, because there were times where the pocket was closing in and it seemed like he just didn't know what to do. I'm saying, throw the ball away, throw it in the vicinity of somewhere of one of your wide receivers, roll out, get out of the pocket, man, because it's danger. There's danger right there. So it just seems like a lot of stuff was off, and specifically Kirk and kind of feeling that pressure and moving. And that's one of the things that he's kind of had, and it's kind of interesting, right? You know,
Mhm.
if I can find like one little shining slither of light that he's not used to having to do that
Yeah,
because he's been pretty upright for the most part throughout this season. So I think a credit goes to the offensive line when they're healthy. But
yeah,
yeah, today it was just seems like it was just one of those days where he just couldn't feel it. He just couldn't quite get it. There was some
yeah,
times where he made some throws, like specific to one of the throws to Darnell Mooney. It seemed like he just put everything he had, all the mustard he had in his pocket on that bad boy, and it barely made it. And I was just like,
yeah,
man, what is going on? So I think this offense, you know, they were able to establish themselves with the run game, which they should have been. You
yeah,
know, those one of those matchup things, like like Aaron mentioned, Seattle hasn't been good. They've been giving up
right.
over 30 points a game, and one of the worst defenses in the league in these past few. So when you think about it from that standpoint, that part they were able to take advantage of, but they just couldn't. The passing game just couldn't get going, and when you
Yeah,
have your quarterback having those timing issues throughout the game and getting off the slow starts, a lot of times those defensive linemen start to smell blood. And it's like, oh, so yeah, you're gonna be a statue? All right,
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
This what we saw on film. So yeah,
yeah,
you're gonna continue to give it to us. Guess what we're gonna start doing? Or one of your offensive linemen go down, we're gonna start running all these stunts. We're gonna start moving up around, and you guys gonna have to really start to think and play together. When you know Hinton and Ryan Newsome hadn't really had that much, many reps together,
yeah.
especially leading into this game. So you saw that come to fruition as well.
Yeah, and for me, Free, just looking at the run game, this is something where we've been talking about it all along, where we had expected the run to be the thing that set up the pass and be the identity of this team, but we kind of didn't see that come to positive fruition, like it didn't pay dividends. But so we can end on a positive note. We'll absolutely take a minute to talk a little bit about the run game, and in particular, one guy who pretty much, I don't even want to say he was just the run game, he was the whole daggone offense. We'll talk about that when we come back. This episode of our Locked On Falcons postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can continue the season getting big returns on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, which, let's be honest, we all thought we were going to get a hunch in the middle of this game that was going to say the Falcons were going to right the ship and they were going to get their 4th straight win in a row, right? It didn't quite happen, but maybe you were one of those people who got a hunch in the game that this was going to be one that was going to be an off one for the Falcons. Whatever the case may be, you can always check out the latest stats throughout any game, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. So you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. So again, yes, the Falcons dropped the game today. So unfortunately, now they're 4-3 on the season, but no worries. There's a whole lot of season left to play, and there's a whole lot of FanDuel left to play to give you some big returns. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, maybe next week when they have a bounce back game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. All right, guys, probably the shining light, the bright spot in this entire day, Jarvis, in this entire day, Free, was Bijan Robinson, who had an absolutely monster game, all-purpose yardage, 21 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown on the ground, and then also really good as a pass catcher, 3 catches for 40 yards with a long of 26 yards. So got to give Bijan Robinson a lot of credit. And also, although it didn't work out in the Falcons' favor ultimately to get a win, a nice game plan by Zach Robinson to at least get Bijan heavily involved in today's game.
Yeah. Bijan was a human highlight reel today.
Yes.
Unfortunately, as we discussed, that's about the only thing that was going in the Falcons' direction this way. But if you just want to enjoy, watching this game again, and I know very few people will, just get a cut up of like Bijan's 20 plays or whatever it is, and just watch that. And you'll be like, man, this was a great game, and then just ignore everything else. Just ignore everything else that happened in this game, because he was making one-handed grabs, he was making all these cuts in the open field, he was turning something. And Jonathan Vilma talked about it in the broadcast, where it wasn't even that the Falcons' offensive line wasn't blocking great today. It was just like he was turning like negative 2-yard runs into like 9-yard gains because he was making all these cuts and he just finding daylight and all that stuff. So he was incredible today. Unfortunately, none of the other 52 guys on the field were incredible enough to help this team win the football game.
Yeah, the team forgot it was a 53-man roster, not a one-man roster, but okay.
And that's what's so frustrating about this, because it wasn't like this was some great scheme when they were giving the ball in the passing game. These were checkdowns. I'm talking about the man catches the ball. There are two defenders right there. For some strange reason, get up the sideline to get a first down. It's like, what is going on? Like, how did he do that? This is wow. This is one of those things we talked about it on the Georgia Bulldogs podcast, as far as running the offense through Trevor Etienne, right?
Yes.
Getting him the football. You don't have to give it to him. Turn around and hand it off 25 times. No, you can do 18, and then you can give him 7 passes, like, and let him go to work. Because the one thing, and you can do the same, and I say the same for Bijan Robinson, because he's just that type of talent where you just get him the football and let him see what he's gonna do. And you see what he was able to do in this offense today. It's just unfortunate that they weren't able to pair it with their wide receiver group, because it's just, I was just like, when they got Drake London 1-on-1 for the touchdown, right? He stemmed him up, boom, broke outside, wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. I was like, oh, so the Falcons just now realized that they have a wide receiver 1, and they need to get him the ball. It's just so. This game is just weird. It was so weird. I tweeted out before we got started. I was like, this is probably one of the most weirdest games that I've ever covered in person that I've ever seen. Like, this is just, and it's just unfortunate that, like, you do it against a team that you could have beat. They could have beat this team. You saw at moments when they were able to take advantage of the Seahawks offensive line, backup guys that they just elevated off the practice squad, not guys who were traded for to bring in to be able to do that. So I think, for me though, overall, there are some decisions that are going to have to be made with this roster as far as playing time. Lorenzo Carter's on the list, so there's plenty of space and opportunity for guys to establish themselves on this defense specifically. I know we're talking about Bijan, but I think overall this coaching staff is going to have to really get into some guys and saying, hey man, have some real conversations. Like, you're not getting it done, sir. So we're going to have to.
Yeah, and that defense is right. And that defense is absolutely going to have to step up, because when they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're going to be taking on a team down in Tampa that absolutely acted a fool against the Saints when they were last in play. Of course, they were on a bye, but like, ultimately speaking, I mean, the Bucs just absolutely acted out against the Saints. And if we're being honest about it, for a big chunk of the game against the Falcons, the Bucs acted out as well. So they're going to have a tall task ahead of them. These Falcons will now taking this team down to Tampa and hoping to get that 4th division win of the season. What do you need to see for them to reset and get that done?
A whole lot. Like, I went into these games thinking, man, Tampa Bay coming off a bye, almost beating the Falcons, putting some points on the board against the Falcons defense. And Todd Bowles probably not doing some of the questionable things he did in that game, where he just kind of left the middle of the field wide open in that Thursday nighter. Like, those are adjustments I expect the Bucs to make. So I expect you in Tampa Bay to get Tampa Bay's an even better punch from them next week. So to me, the Falcons coming off of this game, this needs to be sort of Raheem Morris being like, hey guys, yeah, you won 3 games in division. Hey, you're feeling good. You're the 2 seed at this point, but they don't give out awards. They don't give out seeding. Yeah. You haven't earned nothing. You got to go out there each and every week and earn it. And so hopefully they catch that message and be like, yeah, we played flat. Kirk is a perfectionist. He's going to point the finger at himself, but he's also going to be like, hey guys, I got to get the rest of you guys to step up. Bijan, you're good. You're cool. You keep doing
over there.
Everybody
Exactly.
That's what needs to happen this week in the locker room. And I'm optimistic that Raheem and company can do that, and they'll come out and be able to take Tampa Bay's best punch and potentially rebound next week.
And that's a great point that you make, Free, because while it's one of those games, this game that is, that you may not have to worry about, or it may not have a true lingering effect, if you will, throughout the season, but you do still have to be careful because to your earlier point, you had the Minnesota Vikings falling to the Detroit Lions. So that could go either way, just in terms of when you start talking about those second tier teams that might be looking for that wild card spot, and you always want to avoid it if you can. So you do want to take a game like this next game seriously against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Jarvis, it could be a tall task because we know that, Matthew Bergeron was, in terms of the concussion, he actually cleared that, but then he has the neck injury. And then you looked at Ryan News will go down. And so it's one of those things where you're a little bit concerned about what you saw in the O-line and whether or not they're going to be able to stand up in the trenches against that defensive front of the Bucs. That could be some work cut out for them next week.
Absolutely, because I believe this team, they've proven that they have enough depth to fill in for one injury.
Yes.
One got to go down. Judon went down. Ryan Newsel has been pretty doggone solid. I haven't had really any issues outside of him being a left-handed snapper. I'm sure Kirk Cousins had to get used to that. But outside of that, he's been pretty doggone solid. But having two guys there together that are backups, it's different. It's different because Bergeron has been pretty doggone consistent. You can pretty much, since he went into the starting lineup, he hasn't been out for the most part. So I don't think he's missed a start since he's gone in there. So when you think about him being, for the most part, a healthy player since he came into the league and starting to establish himself as probably a solid young guard in his league, it's kind of unfortunate to see him potentially be out. Like, concussion, that's one thing, but okay, you cleared for that, but now you talk about neck injury and playing next to someone that you're not used to playing next to. That makes all the difference in the world when you talk about offensive line, because those guys have to be so in sync. I'm talking about like synchronized swimming. Those guys got to step the same way, step this way, step that way. It's almost like they're dancing with each other. Like they have to be able
more like Kendrick Lamar than that with synchronized swimming, but okay.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. See,
that's
Xavier education right there. I went to Auburn State. I'm sorry.
That's gonna get you.
Don't blame me.
So blame Xavier for Kendrick Lamar.
Blame Xavier. Yes. There we go.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. To be serious, as much as the Falcons would lose so much, because obviously Matthew Bergeron has been among the top performers at his position across the league, getting high marks, especially this season, just continuing to evolve his game and improve his game. But more importantly, you definitely wish him well so that his health is good for him as a professional, because you just want to see a guy like that continue to shine. So definitely thoughts and prayers are with Matthew Bergeron to be okay. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Locked On Falcons postcast your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by the Atlanta football party for your second listen, and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are also free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you next time.